Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. There's a specific reason why I'm starting this conversation in that way. Firstly, welcome to the Wamly podcast, Solving the People Puzzle. I greeted you in all the time zones because since we launched the podcast, we've featured in multiple continents. So thank you so much for all the listeners who have downloaded and watched the podcast. And then, secondly, because my guest represents a phenomenal multinational organization. So, if the employees and colleagues from this organization is also listening, I hope you're having a lovely morning, afternoon, or evening. My name is Francois. I'm your host. And today I'm so excited to be joined by Natasha Moller, my guest from Distell. Natasha, welcome to the show. It's amazing to have you on, and I'm so excited about our topic and to deep dive into this conversation.
Hi, Francois, guests and listeners. It's an absolute privilege to be here, Francois. I look forward to the conversation as well around this very rich topic that you've selected. And yeah, very humbled to be here today.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, Natasha, I met you a couple of years, it feels like ago. We've had the privilege of working together. And, just for the listeners out there, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
No problem, Francois. I'm Natasha Moller. I'm the HR director for Distell. And I am the proud mother of three beautiful children that I share with my husband, and a passionate advocate for people and the people portfolio. And that's why I've always loved being in HR, and really being a champion for the people, of the people.
Yes, and I love the fact that you are repeating the word people because ultimately, this is what this podcast is about, helping the HR community solve the people puzzle, which has got so many elements to it. And, every time we launch an episode, there's a different topic, of course. And today's, I agree with you, is so rich and I guess we'll never grow old. And the topic is strong leadership or leadership, and I'm super excited about this. We've heard the concept forever. We've studied it, we've spoken about it, we've been on seminars, we've listened to books, podcasts, consultants speaking about it. But ultimately the aim of this podcast is to bring value to the HR community that is practical by nature. And so exploring leadership, especially where we are now, given everything that has happened, I'm extremely excited. So I want to jump straight in and ask you, Natasha, about your personal leadership philosophy.
Well, that's a great question to kickstart the conversation, Francois. If I reflect back on my life and who were some of the great leaders that made an impact on me as an individual, it has to start with my mom. My mom has always played a pivotal role in leading us in the family, in raising us, and really demonstrating what good looks like when it comes to leadership. My mom is a single mother. She raised us after going through a very difficult divorce with my father. She raised three children. I've got a younger brother and younger sister. And she went from being a housewife to having to really be very agile and deal with unexpected circumstances, going back into the workforce as a health practitioner, into public service, and raising a family as well. And what she taught me in that really important season of my life, I was 11, 12, 13, roughly around there, is she demonstrated to me what it means like for a leader, firstly, to put others' priorities first, to create an environment where there's psychological safety,
Sure.
to be change agile, because she had to deal with circumstances that was beyond her control. And she chose to rise above the difficult
Sure.
circumstances, to go in and serve others, not only in her professional career as a health practitioner, but also in the way she served us, her children. And the resilience that she demonstrated as a leader, which I think is so fit for purpose in where we find ourselves in today's context, where leaders in organizations and HR professionals really have to navigate. We've all heard the coin, the VUCA world,
Yeah.
volatile, uncertain,
Yeah.
ambiguous. And it's a tough environment. And what are those really good, strong leadership traits that we need to demonstrate as leaders to successfully lead yourself and others on this ongoing journey? My mother really is one of my strong leadership models and heroes that I definitely reference, and she's influenced my own leadership philosophy.
Sure.
I subscribe to a leadership philosophy of servant leadership,
Mm,
Francois, and for
mm,
me that's really important. You know, when you have a framework where the priorities of others comes first
mm,
before your own
mm,
priorities,
mm.
I think that really sets the tone for how you carry yourself as a leader.
Mm,
And I believe that serving others before I serve myself, my own objectives, I empower others, I
yeah.
uplift them,
Yeah.
and therefore I continue to grow as a leader. And that for me is really powerful.
Sure. Sure. There's so much to unpack in that. The first thing that I picked up, Natasha, is through a really personal relationship. I mean, your mom, in that story, came through so many of the competencies or characteristics that one hears a lot about when leadership gets discussed. Resilience, adapting to change, serving. So when I say leadership is at times most of the times, an extremely personal thing, this story really does resonate back to, it was a personal experience as a girl growing up, which then became a foundational aspect around your own philosophy of leadership, which now allows you to serve your organization in that way. I think that's really powerful. And, so often leadership styles or leadership frameworks get imposed, which will lead me now to the second part of the question, top down from either a consultant or from an idea of an exco, and I believe at times we miss the opportunity to ask the individuals on a deep personal level, what are those leadership behaviors that they do want to show in the organization.
Mm, mm. Now you spot on, Francois, and you've touched on so many rich points. And I think in today's context, it's so important that we lead authentically from who we are
Yes.
as people
Yes.
first, before we see others just as employees. And if you understand what your own leadership philosophy is and what the
Mm,
values are that further amplifies that philosophy, you
mm,
can, as a leader, authentically go and live out that philosophy.
mm,
For me, some of the important leadership traits and behaviors, of course, those interpersonal skills, the soft skills, become so important as you progress upwards in any organization.
yeah.
And that's the difficult people puzzle to solve. We are all human, and I think as we mature in our careers and as we get promoted and we achieve new heights
Mm,
within the organization and in that career ladder, you tick all the technical competencies.
yes.
And I think where we often forget to hone in on is that soft leadership traits that
Mm,
we need
mm,
to continuously refine to improve as leaders.
mm,
Your
mm,
ability to communicate well,
mm,
to have active listening
mm,
skills, to have confidence, but also empathy with your
mm,
teams, with your
mm,
employees, good judgment, which is so difficult when you've got ambiguous context and you've got
yeah.
to make very difficult decisions, as we do as leaders, while you're trying to do what's best for the organization and
Sure.
what's best for
Sure.
the people as well. And that's sometimes not necessarily aligned. Sometimes it's a ambiguous context or paradoxical context. And I think what's special about HR is that you consistently have to navigate that midway between
Yes.
balancing the greater good of the people agenda and the strategic execution of the organization. If you have good leaders in an organization leaders that are authentic, that are inspirational, that knows how to lead their teams um, with creating safe spaces, with getting the best skill sets out of the
Mm.
different
Mm.
diverse members in their teams to execute this against the strategy. That agenda, the people agenda and the business agenda, becomes finely calibrated
Sure.
so that they are aligned. And I think that's a powerful story. I think what we've seen with the COVID pandemic, Francois, is that leaders really had to step up in terms
Yeah.
of the capabilities that they had to develop and
Mm.
how they lead their teams in a way that is inspirational, that is authentic, that speaks to a deep human connection during this volatility and change and disruption. Because all of a sudden, we had organizations that had people that was facing loss of loved ones at home. We didn't know what to expect as we navigated this global pandemic. Are we going to be safe as humans? We
Mm.
had to very quickly adapt to having kids at home. So
Yeah.
there was a blurred line between the workspace and the home life. And leaders really needed to, at pace, reinvent themselves
Yeah.
actually over the last 2 years. And it's so important that we continuously make sure that we have deep investment in ongoing leadership development programs, upskilling leaders so that they know what they need to do in order to lead in this new world
Mm.
faced with
Mm. Mm.
continuous disruption.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me to unpack all of that would be impossible. Let me rather go back because that's gold, Natasha. Thank you. Let me take you to a specific point where the audience might go, okay, we're speaking about personal, authentic leadership. But then there's also, if you look at a selection from a selection perspective or succession perspective, um, what's going to predict success in the role will obviously include technical competence. But then we do have this conversation around culture and environment fits or leadership style. Now, in your opinion, would it matter if the individual's leadership philosophy is different to the organization's? Can it be a good thing? And how are you experiencing that in Distell? The organization's philosophy versus individual leaders in the business.
That's such a great question, Francia, and this is where human behavior and different personality traits play such a rich role because we all bring our own unique
Yes.
flavor of leadership to any organization.
Yeah.
We all are individuals, we all have certain personality traits. And I think typically you will have a natural leaning towards a certain leadership style. There's, of course, very many different leadership styles from being, a democratic style leader, servant leadership, which we spoke about a little bit. To authentic leadership,
To
very
autocratic
authoritarian,
leadership.
autocratic, exactly. And I think what's important is for and you have to bring your individual self and your own uniqueness to any organization.
Mm.
Where I think it's important to calibrate is to understand what the leadership philosophy is of the
Mm.
organization that you're going
Mm.
to join, because
Mm.
that's
Mm.
important. For us at Distell, it's so important that we continuously, as I've said, develop leaders that are absolutely aligned with our purpose and
Mm.
the values that underpin that purpose and
Mm.
the underpinning behaviors.
Mm.
Our purpose at Distell is to create memorable moments and craft a better future. So our
Yes.
leadership philosophy is we continuously want to invest in our leaders and build their capability to, as I've said before, lead as one Distell, cross collaboration, being empathetic, empowering others.
Mm.
As you rise, you uplift others,
Sure.
and leading in a way that is really authentic and
Mm.
drives that human centric connection.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
is very important. For me, what I love about the organization where I work at is the values and the ethos that Distell has is so aligned to my own personal values.
Mm.
And that is really a great synergy. Francia, when there's a disconnect between your personal values and the purpose that is evident in an organization, then I think you've got to reflect and really go and think about, where can I calibrate, where can I hone in, so that there's not this disconnect. And I think one of the ways that you do that as a leader is to continuously reflect and understand and become self aware of what your leadership profile is. And
Yes.
leadership profile talks to, what are your strengths, and you want to continue amplifying your strengths as a
Mm,
leader.
mm,
And that may be the way you inspire your teams, the way you clarify or crystallize a vision,
mm,
the
mm.
way you take your teams along on the journey, the way that you delegate
Yeah.
certain tasks, the way you recognize teams. But you also want to continuously be mindful of what your opportunity stretches are. What are some of those development areas that I've
Mm,
got to
mm, mm.
hone in on and really work hard at improving? And there's various ways that you can do that. You can do assessments. One of the techniques that I love and that I strongly believe in is having a coach and a
Yeah.
mentor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I love about that relationship is that's a two-way relationship where you can get really gold feedback. And as you know, the saying goes, feedback is the breakfast of champions.
Yes.
And that really honest feedback allows you to reflect on your blind spots that we all have as leaders. I am a work of continuous refinement, and I have my imperfections as a leader, and I love feedback. I love getting feedback from peers, from
Mm,
my teams,
mm.
from my coach, and of course from my boss, in terms of where can I improve on, what are the
Yeah.
areas where I need to lean in, and I need to refine my leadership skills and abilities. And of course, it's always good to know what you are doing well so that you can amplify that.
For the audience out there, I hope this is turning out to be one of those episodes where you have to have a pen and paper and just jot down, because Natasha, as you're answering, there's so many practical tips and guidelines that you are giving, which I really hope the audience picks up on. And let me reflect on some of them. I think the first thing that I heard you say is it's okay for individuals to have different personal, authentic leadership styles, up to the point where, of course, you aren't inherently or foundationally being challenged by the organization's culture or leadership style, that you feel you doing yourself and your own authentic way a disservice to. So I mean, there is a line that one can draw. And
Mm,
the other thing that I heard you say, which I don't think we do often enough, is to really zoom in as potential employees to get to know the organization's ethos and leadership style
mm,
before we apply. We as employees, especially in the country we're living in with the high unemployment rate, we're almost, I mean, we are desperate for work. And the
mm,
compromise around that should, in our opinion, I guess, in this conversation today, not necessarily go beyond, what you truly stand for and what you believe in from a values perspective and from an ethos
mm,
perspective. I think the second beautiful nugget that I heard in the conversation is around self-awareness. As you continue to grow as a leader, there is this opportunity for you to gather feedback and know yourself. Look in the mirror. And this can be done, as you said, by many ways: assessments, having a coach, getting feedback, asking for feedback. But it's so interesting because the environment needs to be conducive for that. Some
mm,
organizations don't like feedback because it's highly competitive. Feedback is not seen as a gift or the breakfast of champions, but it's seen as criticism. And it's high performance culture. We don't want to criticize. Everybody wants to be the best. We're jumping on each other's heads to get to the top. And I mean, you and
mm.
I both know that's a reality as well, right?
No, you're so right, Francois. And the sad thing is when you don't give feedback, or you give feedback in a way that tears down and it's not constructive. It's it erodes your culture.
Mm.
We know that culture is leader led,
Yes.
and honest feedback and continuous feedback is so important,
Mm.
because I'm not doing you any favors by not providing you feedback as a
Yeah.
leader. I'm
Yeah.
actually doing you a disservice if I don't provide you feedback. I take away the opportunity for you to learn into your development areas, your opportunity stretches, and to reflect and to refine and work
Mm.
on them.
Mm. Mm.
And I
Mm.
think,
Mm.
that's really, it's the greatest disservice you can do to your teams. You spoke about highly competitive environments, where people don't want to necessarily give feedback, or feedback can be given in a way where it's really destructive.
Mm,
I
mm,
think for us at Distell, it's been very important that we invest in honing the leadership skills on how to coach.
sure,
Not everyone is a natural coach.
sure.
Coaching is a skill that you learn.
Yes.
I'm most certainly on a continuous journey of how to coach others. And I love it because, coaching is such a rich journey, because
Mm,
through coaching you enable and empower others to
mm,
reach their absolute full potential,
mm,
to
mm,
live their full talents,
mm.
and to climb to heights that they perhaps themselves wouldn't have thought they could achieve.
Yeah.
And what's more beautiful within HR than that? Henry Ford said that the highest calling of leadership is the development and growth of others.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that. I think by uplifting others, we uplift ourselves. We really do make the world a better place.
Mm,
So, HR for me is a very special HR leadership, enabling others to reach their potential. One of the ways is through giving feedback, through giving honest feedback.
mm.
But as the saying goes, it's not what you say, it's the
It's
how
how you
you
say
say
it.
it, Francois.
Yes.
I'm a
Yes.
leader at home, I'm a mom. That means that I've got a leadership role to play with my children. The
Yeah.
way I give them feedback when I see behaviors that's not aligned with our family values is important.
Mm,
And for organizations, it's the same. Very often we want to boil the ocean, we want to make it so complex, but actually, it's not.
sure.
It's to your earlier point, making sure that your employees and your leaders understand this is the purpose of our organization.
Yeah.
This is our leadership philosophy. And these are the leadership behaviors that we expect from our leaders.
Mm.
Because you and I know that there are also very destructive leadership styles.
Yes.
And you don't want to tolerate that in your organization. You can get leaders that are very authoritarian, very militant. They lead by power,
Yeah.
by positional title, through fear. And then you get leaders that is perhaps not present. So I'm having a conversation with you, Francois, but I'm continuously checking my phone. I'm absent-minded,
Yeah.
and and you get leaders that deliberately don't create psychological safe spaces through sabotage, through playing their teams against each other,
Mm.
scoring own goals. So you don't want to tolerate those negative and destructive leadership styles. As
Mm.
an organization, you want to be crystal clear on your leadership philosophy, the supporting values, and the expected underpinning behaviors that your
Sure.
leaders need to
Sure.
demonstrate. And that impacts your culture.
100%. I very often get asked the question, what is culture? And my answer is always culture is leadership behavior. Leadership behavior will ultimately determine the culture of an organization. And, there's such a huge responsibility. We see in the industry and with clients that most of them will have a leadership philosophy and an ethos, but it very seldomly trickles down to observed behavior. And then together with that, the consequence management of behavior that is not in line with what we all agreed on when we built the philosophy. Natasha, I'd love to just go to one of the elements you mentioned around the change. So we all know the last 24 months. What happened? Organizations had to shift. Working from home became working from anywhere. Um, in your context, what changed from a leadership perspective on a behavioral level? And the reason I'm asking this question is in the audience, individuals on the same level as you who do have decision making authority and power, who are directors, who are executives, might listen to this and go, well, I've wanted to change this. I haven't been sure how practically. What changes did you see happen in your context, if you don't mind sharing?
I think the last 24 months has definitely been a disruptor across the globe.
Yes.
Within HR and the people agenda, we very quickly had to understand the new context, the new reality, and create playbooks around new people practices and new leadership behaviors
Sure.
that we needed in the organization, because all of a sudden we had leaders that were severely under pressure. That's the first one, because you suddenly have to think about problems that you did not necessarily have before. You had to think about, how do I lead my team suddenly in a hybrid model where I've got team
Mm,
members working remotely from
mm,
home? How do
mm,
I
mm.
foster and maintain connection and collaboration? How do I delegate via this online world? How do I make sure that the well-being of my teams are still balanced? Because we know that the lines between switching off at the office, when you physically walked out of the office,
Yes.
get in your car and you go home, became completely blurred because it was just too easy. People worked excessively long hours, and it was tough for leaders, Francois.
Yeah.
Um, and very very quickly you realize that we're actually out of our depth and we need help. And I think for us, what's changed and what we've seen in the last 2 years is that movement towards deep human connection
Sure.
and seeing our employees as more than just an employee.
Sure.
You know, realizing that Francois has a wife and I think that was the fantastic benefits of suddenly moving huge cohorts of workers working from home, because suddenly I see your dog and your cat and I meet your kids for the first time as they pop in onto a Zoom call or a Teams call. And it was fantastic because we had to have real conversations around well-being,
Yeah.
which is such an important topic for our employees and for our organization, and making sure that we invest in the well-being of our employees.
Mm,
We
mm.
had to lead employees that were really anxious,
Yeah.
that were stressed, and then remember, your leaders are also your employees. So for us, what we did is we created and crafted, and it was really a journey that started before COVID. It was just coincidental that the timing was fortunate. We crafted a bespoke flagship leadership program
Oh, wow.
with really bespoke programs and interventions that looked at authentic leadership, connected leadership, visionary leader.
Mm.
How do leaders become more digitally fluent and dexterous as
Sure.
we drive, as an example, our digital transformation journey? Because here's the thing, what COVID did is it frog marched organizations and
Yeah.
workplaces into the fourth industrial revolution, which
100%.
we thought was going to be a few years away. And that in itself required just a new set of leadership skills, mind shift changes, and how we show up and inspire our teams despite this really volatile, disruptive, unpredictable
Yeah.
context that we found ourselves
Yeah.
in, because nobody knew what was going to happen tomorrow. So, in a nutshell, we had to become more human as leaders. We had to form deeper connections. We had to take the time and listen
Yeah.
and really work hard and be intentional about creating psychological safe spaces for our employees to share and to check in before you jump into task. Francia, are you okay today? What is your heart space and your head space like? Let's talk about that. One of the things that we implemented, which was fantastic, was around creating memorable moments, which also speaks to our purpose. And we had this really practical exercise where once a week we would connect and we would have a topic, whether that's tell us about who your favorite superhero is, and why you identify with that person. And of course, we went through all the Marvel characters and so forth, and that was fantastic. And on another occasion, we had to say, what animal do you represents you the most, and
Sure.
why that specific animal. And so I think we really did some activities that we would not necessarily have had the opportunity to do if it wasn't for the pandemic.
Yeah.
We got the opportunity. with that pressure. You know, pressure is a privilege, Francois. It allows us as leaders to ascend into that next level of growth,
Come on.
and of leadership and of potential.
Yeah.
And for me, that was fantastic to see the tangible results of our ongoing investment in our leadership program, our ongoing investment in developing our people. And remember, leadership for us has got absolutely nothing to do with your position or your title. We believe that you lead from where you are.
Wow.
Anyone can lead. The tangible results for us was the excellent financial performance, the
Yeah.
market share that we gained against our competitors. And despite tough trading conditions in the South African market, which was one
Well,
of the
there was
only
a ban.
markets
There
during
was a
that
ban,
time
right?
where we were unable to sell our beautiful, beautiful brands. And that's a fantastic story to tell, how our leaders and our employees and our teams rose to the occasion with resilience, with humbleness, and a
Mm,
true spirit to collaborate
mm.
together as one work family. That was great to see.
I, I have to go back and just say that in episode one and episodes to come, there are organizations that thrived and grew during this pandemic. And you just explained that as well. And that's just so testimony for me to leadership behavior in times of challenge, but also seeing that and positioning that as a time of opportunity.
Mm,
What is fascinating for me, Natasha, is how I'm continuing to hear the importance and the focus on being human, whether that's your leadership philosophy or how you rise to the challenge or what you do during, the ambiguous context. But then also, I heard from you through leadership development programs and initiatives that you implemented a new language around competencies, which is fourth industrial revolution, digitizing, thinking, tech, and HR as a community and technology don't always marry and gel so seamlessly well together. And I can say this because as Wamly, we're delivering HR tech, and it's an interesting conversation when you approach and you meet and you speak with HR individuals, and this idea of we understand we have to digitize, but then there is that resistance to do that. And it's great to hear that through your leadership programs, with everybody being able to be a leader, there is this focus on the forward thinking competencies that you won't typically find in your typical competency framework that we all know so well: teamwork, examining information, showing resilience, adapting to change. Yes, we know those are important and we measure them, but there are some other competencies coming out that it sounds like, together with this human element, has now moved you as an organization forward.
absolutely, Francois. You know, digital transformation is an arena where I think a lot of organizations are still grappling with, because I think there's the one side, which is the technology and the new platforms, which you can, and the infrastructure, the hardware, the software, which you can, that's tangible. You can accelerate that. But in order for you to be successful in transforming digitally as an organization, you need to take your people along with you on this
Yes.
journey. And I
Yes.
think HR plays a pivotal role. And you are right. I think there's often maybe a little bit of a hesitation from HR to jump fully in, HR
Mm,
professionals.
mm,
But I think
mm,
it's so important that we do. HR is often known for, as a practical example, designing these beautiful programs, these beautiful solutions, but it's so HR centric. And I think one of the key themes that we've seen through the accelerated digital transformation journey in organizations is the human design and design thinking,
mm,
which speaks
mm,
and
mm,
pivots
mm.
around customer first. How do you design a solution? And you will understand this environment very well, Francois. How do you design a product or service with a customer in mind? Our
Yeah.
customers is our employees. And I think it's absolutely important that we, first of all, understand what does digital transformation mean for our customers in organizations, which is our employees. How do we upskill ourselves so that we can have really robust conversations with other business stakeholders in the organization around how do we make sure that we empower, upskill, reskill our employees so that
mm,
they
mm, mm.
can go along on this digital transformation journey? And what does digital fitness and digital fluency look like? What are those
Sure,
capabilities that
sure.
we've got to go and invest in for our employees? And I think those conversations are absolutely, absolutely critical. We live in an era where data and insights are becoming the new competitive advantage. And for
100%.
us to understand how to move the organization and the people to become a really strong data and insights organization, and thereby creating that competitive edge, becoming more sustainable, outperforming your competitors, gaining market share,
Yeah,
that is critical
yeah.
to the future HR professional. We cannot underplay that skill and building and developing that capability.
I think this is such a wonderful place to land the plane for today's episode. I'm so passionate about the fact that if you are still wondering as an HR practitioner, the listeners out there, if you are still wondering if you need to digitize, you, you missed it. We are in the future. This is the fourth industrial revolution. And, what I love hearing what you're saying and what we also really want to do is guide and educate and help on that journey and empower the HR community to take up that responsibility. I mean, we are long past HR being a shared service administrative department in the corner without a voice, without a seat around the table. And it's such a passion of mine to inspire and encourage, and I'm hearing the same from you, to get HR practitioners to understand that there's so much value that could be added if you embrace rather than resist the opportunities that technology does present.
No, you're so right, Francia. And this, very often we just have to lean into perhaps our fear of upskilling ourselves.
Mm.
There's a lot of great digital fitness apps available. PricewaterhouseCoopers, I think, has one. And so there are many more where you can go and just, do little short bursts of online learning videos that you can watch, podcasts that you can listen to. What does the Internet of Things mean? What does the fourth industrial revolution mean? What does big data mean? Big tech,
Yes,
all of that. And it's a fascinating world. I think for us as HR professionals, the reality is that the future employee is already here. The
sure,
generational workforce has shifted. We
sure.
currently probably have a majority of millennials in organizations, but that very swiftly will change to your Gen Zs.
Yeah,
So digital natives, Francois, is the employee of the future. We have to understand what makes them tick, what
sure,
are their needs, and
sure.
how are we going to meet that, and how are we going to create employee journeys and meaningful employee experiences that positions your organization as an employer of choice when it comes to this war for talent. And by doing so, you've got to make sure that you understand again that digital landscape and what talent you've got to bring in
Mm,
to
mm,
really
mm.
set your organization up for success.
Absolutely. And to bring this full circle, that then goes back to leadership having the awareness and the insights around what are those future capabilities, how do we build these strategies to attract and retain this talent that we're speaking about in this highly competitive war for talent with the great resignation and everything that's going on. So, Natasha, maybe if I can ask you to end off practically, two or three leadership skills, characteristics, traits for the future, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you've got to be a great storyteller. I think
Mm,
you've got to take, we've spoken about data. You've got to be able to understand data and insights and base your decisions on that, strategic decisions, and then have the ability to go and tell the story.
sure.
And by doing that, you will hopefully create an environment where your teams and your employees understand what the vision is that you're selling to them. And they are so inspired that they want to follow you as a leader, and they want to lean in and make this vision come alive. So I think storytelling is absolutely,
Sure.
absolutely important. Authentic leadership, I've spoken about it a lot. I think that's so important, Francia. You know, employees today want to work for leaders that are vulnerable,
Sure.
that are courageous in sharing who they truly are. The fact that they make mistakes. I make mistakes often, and I'm very open about it, because, as I say, I'm a leader in progress,
Mm. Mm.
and I
Mm.
think that authenticity goes a long way in creating a safe psychological space for others to bring their full selves
Yeah.
to the table. So I think that for me would be the second one. And then I think a visionary leader and the ability to have foresight. And again, you touched on it just now, the ability to almost anticipate
Yeah.
what are some of the shifts that we're going to see at a macro level, but then also at a micro level. What are some of the things that I need to anticipate and be ready for and plan for as a leader in this really rapidly evolving digital disruptive world?
Sure.
And then you've got to be change fit and change ready as a leader,
Yes.
with that. So that's where I will cap it,
Love that.
Francois.
Love that. Storytelling, authentic leadership, foresight, visionary. Those are phenomenal ingredients. Natasha, I can't thank you enough. This has been a an episode with so much golden nuggets, with so much insight, with so much authentic truth. Um, and I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, to the audience out there. I I absolutely know that you would have gotten a lot of value from this. And Natasha, thank you so much for joining us and sharing just your thoughts around strong leadership.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure and such a privilege to share this space with you, Francois. What you're doing with Wamly, as I've said to you on numerous occasions, is absolutely fantastic. The solutions that you're providing for both the HR community, the talent community, a future candidate who's looking to become employed, and then, of course, for organizations is absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
So, all the best to you and the Wamly team. And it was an absolute privilege to be with you in the studio today.
Thanks, Natasha. Have a lovely day.